I hereby call the City of Lloydminster regular council of Monday, January 27th, 2020 to order at this time. And at this time, we will take a silent moment of personal reflection. As a reminder, all members of council are obligated to declare a conflict of interest or a pecuniary interest as per section 133 of the Lloydminster Charter regarding any item on this agenda. Not seeing any, I will move on to item number 2. Is there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Not seeing any, I will move to item number 3 and look for direction from council regarding the approval of this agenda. Councilor Buckingham.
Move that the agenda of January 27, 2020 be approved.
Seconder? Councilor Baker? Any discussion on the agenda as presented? Not seeing any, I'll call for the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moving on to item number 4, approval of minutes of the previous meeting. I'll look for direction from council. Councilor Buckingham.
Move that the regular council minutes dated January 13, 2020 be approved.
Seconder? Councilor Thorson. Any discussion from those minutes? Not seeing any, I'll call for the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moving on to item number 5, business arising from those minutes. Not seeing any noted. Move on to new business. And 6.2, city manager. Move to the city manager.
Good afternoon, Worship Council. Item we have before you is our membership with the Vermilion River Regional Alliance, or better known as VRA. Recently, the City of Lloydminster has received an invoice for membership from the VRA in the amount of $10,000. Most municipalities pay per capita. I believe it's $1 per capita, and we're capped at a $10,000 limit. The VRA is a group of members within the region who encourage tourism and economic development throughout the region. The members include the Village of Kidscotty, Paradise Valley, County of Vermilion River, Village of Dewberry, Town of Vermilion, Lakeland College, the Village of Marwayne, and the Village of Manville. The administration brought this item forward on January 21st to GPC for discussion as bringing back for direction. Your options before you is to continue to be involved with VRA with no membership fees being paid, which would probably result in no vote at the table as well when it comes to membership. Secondly, that council purchase a membership to be a voting member of the Vermilion River Regional Alliance to be funded through the general government operating reserve, as we do not have this item budgeted, so we would have to draw from a reserve. Or the third option is to request additional information for the VRA membership. I'll pass it on to you for, or back to you for further discussion.
Thank you, city manager. Councilor Dodger.
Yes, thanks, Your Worship. I attended the VRA meeting on Thursday last week. Can't recall the specific date. We are one of 2 organizations that haven't paid our membership up to this point. We were asked if the City of Lloydminster would participate, and I said at this point we haven't made a motion. We had discussed it at our GPC meeting, and I did, however, identify some of the challenges that came with it, and indicated that there were some concerns and if I was to give an impression, it was not likely that we would continue. However, that was still subject to this vote. It was a bit of a spirited discussion following that. There were suggestions that perhaps we weren't being good neighbors, and in fact, I asked the question as to what we've actually accomplished with the VRA over the past couple of years. And in essence, there were 2 outcomes, I feel like, that were identified. One was the VRA signs that are on the outside of the city limits. And secondly, the work that's been done on the broadband proposals that the company out of Calgary, Merrick, I can't remember the company's name. I indicated that we had expressed some concern about the broadband study, given that the money that was being spent of all of the funds was really not a common priority for us. and that we wish that going forward that, funds out of these that had been put into the account really address priorities that were shared by everyone. That didn't occur. Subsequent to that, we have made some changes. First off, to the terms of reference, and one of the pieces in the terms of reference specifically identifies that we would identify shared priorities that we would all agree to work upon. We would use a consensus model in making decisions around determining what those shared priorities were. Otherwise, what we would see in essence is that we have one vote and we would be outvoted even though we're the largest contributor in terms of funds going forward. There was some interest as to trying to unpack what consensus was, and I said, well, let's keep it really simple. It's what you can live with and defend when you go back to your councils or your offices and as representatives to your local political bodies you represent. But I said, if typically when you are in a position where you can't support a priority, it's because you don't have enough information. So it's easy for us to table that information and say, let's come back with more information to be able to determine whether or not it's a shared priority. However, the third piece we added into the terms of reference was that if there's a sense of urgency, we'd look for at least 2/3 majority to determine if that priority was important enough that we would move forward on. So those are the changes in essence, the terms of reference, the fact that there'd be shared priorities, and in fact when the chair shared his final message on behalf of himself and speaking to the work that had been done the prior year, he highlighted that change in terms of reference and that process of working together as one of the highlights that he had seen for the years, being able to move us closer together, and in fact identifying 4 shared priorities. People were concerned that without the city, really there wouldn't be much done, and so I challenged that from a couple of perspectives. One is that when we looked at the role that we typically have played as a committee, there's a question I think was raised at the last meeting, what have we done? And if we look back at what we've done, we really haven't accomplished much aside from the broadband and the sign that requires cash and to make things happen. And my sense was that the dialogues that we had and sharing of information was perhaps the most important part relative to our functioning as a good neighbor within the community. I highlighted the fact that Ace Water demonstrates our capacity and desire to work with our community. I highlighted the fact that both the county and the city have written letters of support for projects that we've undertaken, wastewater treatment for us, tourism for the county, and said, you know what, that didn't take a nickel of money for us to be able to do. But there's a lot of goodwill we develop in building relationships. And I spoke to the fact that committee, the VRRA, is not a committee of doers. There's no administrative help. And at the point we're at, in order to have some administrative help to be able to move some projects along, would mean people would have to contribute more cash to that committee in order to make it work. My concern is that we would be the largest contributor to make this happen. And secondarily is that many of the communities that do provide through a per capita funding formula really have little more to add to the financial budget. So from that perspective, from a functional point in terms of what was most important, it was mostly that we get together, we share concerns. We've talked about policing, we've talked about rural crime, we've talked a number of topics, economic development, broadband keeps coming up over and over again. And I think there's shared priorities that we talked about, one being tourism, economic development, health, transportation for seniors and those who don't have access to transportation to access health. So those priorities are priorities we can talk about, and we have people in our administrations that can relate to each other. That costs us $0. The conversations we pay for our meals when we attend, and I think those pieces are the part that are important going forward. We were informed prior to the meeting, because we didn't pay our fees, that we would not be a voting member, and said that's fine, as long as we can continue to have the dialogue, because from our perspective, that dialogue and building our good relationships with our neighbors has been the most important priority that we had going forward. That sentiment wasn't shared by everyone. It was definitely shared by those organizations that didn't pay alongside of us. And so at this point, I guess I'd open it up. I don't know if there's any more questions, but I don't see that there's value in contributing those dollars. However, there is a value in us continuing to meet with our neighbors.
I'd like to add, I wasn't in the main meeting. I appreciate Councilor Ratchuk bringing back the report he did. To fill in a few of the pieces he discussed, the broadband was done by Taylor Warwick Consulting, which we had the opportunity to partake, but due to some other activities that the cities had some discussions with, we felt it wasn't in our best interest, because they were looking at being an open utility by the municipalities. So for us to go down that road, we wouldn't be building a wastewater treatment plant, we wouldn't be facing the other, we kind of do everything. And from that perspective, I think that was one of the challenges. Another highlight, and Councilor Batchuk did allude to it, was the FCSS letter of support that was signed by 7 regional municipalities, both urban and rural, talking about the importance of FCSS. And I don't believe that helped hold the FCSS funding to this past budget with the province of Alberta. So we can do things together. And I think that, the signs that promote the area are terrific. I think there will be opportunities in the future. We will not, and I'll say this very clearly, we will always be at the table with the RRA if we're welcome. But if we have to pay to simply be at that table, then we have to take a look at it. But I think the option we've been given today is we can continue to be an active part of the RRA, but if we see an opportunity as the representatives, whoever that is, from this council at the VRA Association, says, hey, I think we need to come back and ask council for $10,000, we have that opportunity because we see the value. Right now, the value, there's the $10,000 we sit in the bank account, but we've got other memberships, which is terrific, but in the same token, based on where we've been, I think we learn each and every day, and I look at our council, we've learned an awful lot in just over 3 years about different things and different experiences, and this is one of those that we would just wait till that opportunity that we see the value with the other members. And we bring, they appreciate us being at the table. I think everyone in the municipalities there do appreciate us being there, because we are the largest from the perspective that we have the most experience on certain things, and we have offered assistance in the past to our neighbors. And we'll continue to do that. We'll be good neighbors. But good neighbors always have to ante up with the cash until it's necessary. I'm prepared to vote sometime, I hope in the future, that says, yeah, there's an opportunity. It's economic development. It's something that's going to benefit the entire region, including the 30,000 taxpayers and residents of the city. I think that's where it really lies from my perspective. Councilor Bill.
I do appreciate that there's really room for important dialogue at these meetings. I just asked Councillor Diachuk, do you know if there is a situation that should arise that would benefit our community with a voting membership? Are we able to buy in at any time, or is there a certain time during the year that you would have to have that buy-in? Say, is it a renewal process January 1st, and that's the only renewal process throughout the year, or is there a renewal process at a different time throughout the year?
I would have to go back and look at the terms of reference. I don't believe the terms of reference are that specific relative to that specific question. I guess I was going to just to reinforce, I think, what the mayor said, that indicated that in the event there were projects that required us to contribute financially, be it less or even more than 10,000, it was to be for the value of the region, we would be more than willing to be partners in that process. At this point, however, though, the objectives of the committee really aren't in any way connected to the $10,000. It's intended more around planning and sharing and kind of stewardship of some of the ideas, so that there's a shared sense of priority. One of the pieces I also highlighted is that our ability and role as a partner, in particular Marwayne, I believe, had some challenges with their water system when it was up and running. Our staff went and helped. And so, we continue to be a good neighbor and a good partner in terms of working with them. And so that's not contingent on this. I mean, we reach out to municipalities on an ongoing basis to support one another. I think the emergency document that's been drafted by the city to, I've forgotten his name, I'm sorry, but I think it was Ernie who drafted it. I mean, that again reflects the sentiment that, we're stronger together than individually. But it's also important to understand what you're getting into. And part of it is ensuring that we understand what the terms of reference are, what the role of that committee is, and not trying to overshoot the mark and all of a sudden finding that because we have $10,000 or $15,000 that we now look for something to spend it on.
So if we did contribute that $10,000, just to be clear, that $10,000 would be going to help facilitate consultants or whatever project that you're maybe wanting to pursue within the region, is that correct? Or where would that money be going should we project to contribute that $10,000?
Pardon me, my understanding is that the way we structure the terms of reference, the only way any projects would have any support financially from the VRRA is if that we all supported it through a consensus process, or if there was a sense of urgency, a 2/3 majority. Otherwise, whoever was bringing the project forward would have to go and do more research and bring it back, not unlike the process we use on council.
Perfect.
So if I can add, Councillor, from my understanding, there is no project today.
Yeah.
It's simply going to go into a bank account that's being managed. It's been managed by our municipality, and we have the recording duties assigned, and it has traveled between Vermilion, Lloydminster, and County of Vermilion River. It's just going to sit in, the membership today will be sitting in the bank account in Town of Vermilion today, and then when the membership changes, or sorry, the recordership and secretary services move to another municipality, that money will be transferred over.
I've just added the AGM Vermilion has agreed to continue managing the funds. It's small stuff, right?
Perfect. I appreciate both of your contribution that you will sit on that committee, so thank you.
Councilor Dorsey.
Thank you, Your Worship. So, there's one, I guess, question that I have, but also a comment to more or less sum up what I'm gathering here is that the cost is about $10,000, but that cost, all it really gets you is a vote that potentially could be worth nothing if you're outvoted. But the value is really in the conversations and getting together and sharing information and making sure everyone's, knowing what's going on with each other and working on best practices if something's coming up. So my only concern is if that $10,000 potentially has another cost in terms of potential lost goodwill between us and the neighbors, if you feel as though there could potentially be enough backlash that they would be unhappy enough that, that you're just not welcome there anymore.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that, I think that was in essence what I heard from a couple of members suggesting that it was perhaps an act of lacking in goodwill by not participating, if I could put it in the gentlest of ways. My response was that we have acted as good partners all along and identified, the Marween project with water, Ace Water, reaching out letters of support, vice versa, and I just noted that it had absolutely nothing to do with VRA. So those outcomes really were pieces that were completely outside of VRA. I would in fact suggest that where we've probably seen a loss of goodwill is that even under protest, where some funds were spent relative to some of the studies, they proceeded and the response was majority wins. That's the way it goes. So I think, that sense of creating shared priorities together, and I don't think we're alone. I mean, everybody agreed. And I heard sort of, very quietly around other conversations and other members that was an important shift because there's a real sense that if you have the dominant voice at the table, away you go and money gets spent.
Councilor.
Well, at the end of the day, in a way, I'm going based off the fact that I trust Councilor Diachuk, who's on here, and kind of his advice as to the way things have been going and through, what he's given to administration on this thing. I trust his opinion on what's been going on and whether or not we can claw back ground, if you will, on the cost thing if the shared priorities develop into a project that's worth the city putting money behind, in which case that would, put it back to the way it was at this point. But I agree that I don't necessarily see the value in the $10,000 at this time. So what's the sense in spending it?
I think there's a need for a reset as well. And I think that's sentiment that I had with a couple of individual communities, and they can share their story because it's their story to share. But it was that, that we've continued to do things the way we've always done them. And we're now challenging this process where we go, we talk, and priorities have been identified, projects have been identified, and even if people are opposed, there's still there's a problem with the process. Because I think some of the pieces, perhaps have benefited one community more than the other. And I think that's an issue that is shared, again, that's other people's opinion to share, not mine.
Right.
Councilor Buckingham, we'll get Councilor Baker.
Thank you, Worship. Just through Councilor Diachuk, I guess would be the way we're going here. You alluded to the fact that we weren't the only municipality negotiating or discussing potential membership in this organization. And I just wonder if we don't and others don't, do you have any sense that the actual committee will just dissolve itself, or will it stay working, in your opinion?
No, well, I think the terms of reference specify that, they identify who the members are, they identify the working relationship, and if you don't pay, you don't vote.
That's it.
That's it.
Yeah, pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
That's what was portrayed before the annual general meeting last Thursday. Information I received as a committee member from that perspective. We're welcome today. We just won't be able to vote on a motion. And, I'm open to that from the perspective that, you know, the dollars and cents that are left remaining in the current balance, there's not going to be a project undertaken unless other parties join in that haven't taken membership at this point.
But the good chance that the committee structure stays and the conversations continue to be had, regardless of whether 1, 2, or 3 municipalities don't pay their per capita fee to vote, the conversations, you think the group will still carry on?
Well, I think so, but, you know, ultimately, if the paying members who vote want to change that, they have the right to change it. So I can't speak for them, and that's part of the challenge, I think, as you're identifying.
Good thing.
Thank you. Councilor Baker.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess I've been doing a lot of thinking about this one. It's been around a long time. And first of all, I'd like to thank Councilor Diachuk for his good work on getting the terms of reference straightened out and dealing with it on a consensus basis rather than a vote basis. We all know when the city goes to Sumer or Yuma, the small cities can get outvoted every time, the way the structure's set up. And this is no different. But rather than just walk away, I don't worry about the goodwill. We've got, I think, goodwill with most of the folks around us. When we get FCSS dollars from the province, so does everybody else get some FCS dollars. And if you look where our FCSS dollars go, they're shared with the whole community. They're not just Lloydminster. They go to an organization in the city. Many people outside of the city access those services. So they're not being shortchanged by our FCSS. In fact, they're gaining the FCSS. And I'm happy about that, because there's a lot of great social services provided in the city that serve people outside of our region. I think that the better way to do it is go in as a non-paying member, and if something comes up that serves everybody, we have this $10,000 reserve, and if it's $2,000 for us and $100 for the smaller community, so be it, whatever the split is. And we think it's something that serves us all, as Councillor Michael just pointed out, then we can contribute. But what happened last year, 2 years ago, we voted against taking all the money and putting it into this internet system, and we weren't even interested in it because it wasn't even part of our agenda or part of our city, yet the money disappeared. It went and we used it for other things. So if you had the money here and you approve it on an as-go basis, you could still pay if it was a good project, and if it's not so good a project, you just say, we don't agree with that and we don't pay. So, but if you come to consensus, it's okay, then with direction from the representative on that committee, City Council could deal with it. That might be a better way to deal with it and still be members and still serve it when the right things come to the table. And as far as the cost, when it's having supper, you can have the meetings at 7 o'clock at night instead of 6 o'clock. You don't have to feed everybody a sandwich, because most people don't eat anyway. But that's the only cost outside of the projects. And we can all take a turn sharing the meeting room whenever it's our turn to go. So I'm not making a motion right now, Your Worship. That's just food for thought. Thank you.
Appreciate that, Councilor. Any other comments?
I was just going to add, it's the tail end of what Councillor Baker noted, that one of the challenges is that committee simply does not have staffing to be able to do things. So if anybody's going to apply for a CARE grant or CARES grant or anything else, in the end, it's going to be the administration of one of the municipalities. So the doing is kind of done by the doers who, you know, are paid employees for the city or the county or the hamlet or whatever the community is. And so from that perspective, is that, you know, the question is, so what does that committee really need funding for? Because in the end, there just isn't a lot of doing relative to spending and saying, here's a project that can have an impact regionally. And I think one of the categories as well as priority was advocacy. We're stronger when we advocate together as a group, and we have the MLA there, and again, everybody shared the concerns. But that's a much more important role for that committee rather than saying, let's go get a grant to do something, because the size of the grant you're gonna get, if your capital you have in the bank is $15,000, it's marginal. You're not really going to accomplish a lot.
I agree with you, Councillor, wholeheartedly, and I think that having that relationship, we will be able to maintain that relationship. We'll continue to be there for meetings, and I want to let council know that the schedule is 5 meetings a year for VRI. So if something did come up at the next meeting, as an example, we would have the opportunity to bring it back to council and not delay the process by too much and continue on. It's not once a year meetings or anything like that. If you need a decision, you have to wait a whole year. So I appreciate the information and the discussion. With that, I'll look for council for direction on 6.2.1.
That motion.
Councillor
If I
Dutch.
can pull it up here, sorry.
Sorry.
The council, okay, that's not the one I wanted. Okay, where are we at? Council continue to be involved with the Vermilion River Regional Alliance, VRA, with no membership fees being paid.
Second, Councillor Thorson. Any further discussion? Not seeing any. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moving on to 6.3, the Office of City Clerk, I'll include the City Manager.
Thank you, Your Worship, to present 6.3.1, 1248202 Alberta Limited request. I'll ask the city clerk to present.
City Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. The item we have before us now is a request from administration has received a request from a landowner to credit their account due to a water leak. The recommendation is that the council deny the request from 1248202 Alberta Limited for an adjustment of unpaid utility charges that were transferred to the tax roll. The background is that administration brought forward a request for decision on December 16, 2019 regarding the property owner's request of a utility charge to be removed from their taxes, as they did not feel that they did feel that they'd done everything within their power to locate a water leak that led to charges. The leak occurred in a private water system for which the owner is solely responsible with the maintenance and upkeep. Council directed the administration to provide more information on the account history and bring the item back to this meeting. Prior to this meeting, Council has been provided with a confidential briefing note that outlines the historical detail of the account and previous payment arrangements. This information is not released publicly as per Section 18 of the Local Authorities Freedom of Information and Protection Privacy Act, or LAFOIP, as it contains financial information of a third party. Should Council wish to discuss this document, they would be required to go in camera. The proprietor was advised that we would be dealing with this at this council meeting, however, declined to attend. The options that Council has is that Council deny the request from 1248202 Alberta Limited for an adjustment of the unpaid utility charges that were transferred to the tax roll. The Council approved the adjustment to the utility bill that was transferred to the tax roll, or that Council request additional information and send it back to administration. This item is in alignment with the following strategic areas: is open and responsive government. Administration is bringing forward a request from the taxpayer for council decision. Government implications is that under the authority of Section 295 of the Lloydminster Charter, council has the cancel, reduce the arrears, or cancel and refund part of a tax, or defer tax collection. Use of this section may, however, set a precedent for cancellation of property taxes. Budget and financial implications is the amounts that was transferred from the water account to the tax roll was $28,156. Back to you, Your Worship.
Thank you, City Clerk. Questions, comments? Councillor Baker.
Your Worship, if I may refer back to December 16th, I think was the last time we dealt with this issue.
Yes, it was.
And there was quite a few questions from some of us from council. And in the background report that came out, it said council directed administration to provide more information on the account history and bring the item back to the January 27th, 2020 council meeting for decision. Then in the report today, that we can't discuss the details of it because of freedom of information, and I understand that. Regardless of what the details are, but I understand what the position is, and it's certainly the responsibility of the city clerk's office to make sure that we do things correctly. And I'm asking a question rather than making a motion, because I'm not sure I would make it correctly. Could we go in camera later today, when we're going in camera, and talk about this, because there's a lot of information I'd like to ask about before we deal with it. And I'm not quite sure if you have to table it and then you have to go into camera, how you do it. I'm just asking because I'm not sure.
Yeah, I'll ask the city clerk to respond.
Yes, Councilor, you have the ability to go on camera right now, discuss this item, and then come out and make a motion. And then, once you complete your meeting, go into camera and discuss those other items, so they're not confused.
Your worship, I guess asking everybody to leave and then come back was my consideration.
So I appreciate that, Councilor Baker.
But whatever the rules are.
Well, I can say this, we have the ability to make a motion after the in-camera session that's scheduled for today, but it won't be in the public eye as the public is present today, and that's the only challenge we have. So we have done it before, to ask to go into camera and ask
Okay.
to clear the chamber for a short period, and in essence, discuss this and bring it back from that perspective. Elliot Foyt was there for a reason, and I appreciate the city clerk's advisement on that, if we need to answer some questions, because simply we could bring it back, but I know that I'd like to stay with the format we're at today.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Because that motion comes forward afterwards, will be in public, and we'll go from there. So I guess I would ask, if that's the wishes of the council, to go into camera, I'll need a motion to go into camera. Councillor Fagan, motion to go into camera. Seconded by Councillor Baker. I'll call for the question. All in favor? Carried. So I'll ask those in the room
Yes, I did.
You're good, come on in, Cheryl.
First you put a fence and now we're telling you to back up.
I saw you were running over the
Why is it different? Oh, I thought maybe.
As everybody gets their coffee, we're convening here momentarily.
two pictures. That tells you how much I hate seeing myself.
All right, council and ladies and gentlemen, I'll bring this meeting back to order in session. Thank you very much for those that stepped out. Appreciate you taking working with us as we work through in-camera item. Just to summarize, basically, council has provided information by administration regarding this event, this matter that is before us today with some history, and gave us a good synopsis of that information. Due to the nature of the information, that's why it was felt that it was best in camera, because of the information regarding certain individuals and process. So thank you for bearing with us on that. Council, any questions of administration and debate to go further on this item? Excuse me, Council Buckingham.
I'll make a motion.
Make a motion, certainly.
Make a motion that council deny the request from 1248202 Alberta Limited for an adjustment of the unpaid utility charges that were transferred to the tax roll.
Second. Councilor Chuck. Any further discussion? Not seeing any, I'll call for the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, Mr. Clerk. Moving on to agenda item 6.3.2, and I'll up to City Manager.
Thank you, Your Worship, to present 6.3.2, request for support, FCM resolution. I'll turn it over to the city clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. The recommendation is the council resolve that the mayor provides a letter to Strathcona County supporting their proposed resolution of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, FCM, that urges the federal government to work with the provinces, municipalities, and indigenous groups to establish the utility corridor that would span from coast to coast, and to repeal or amend Bill C-48 and C-69. The issue is Strathcona Council is requesting a letter of support from the mayor for a resolution that they are proposing to put forward to FCM. The background is that on December 10th, 2019, Strathcona County approved the submission of a resolution to FCM that would urge them to advocate the federal government to work with the provinces, municipalities, and indigenous groups to establish a corridor that would span from coast to coast, and to repeal and amend Bill C-48 and C-69. Strathcona County believes that Canada has an obligation to develop our resources in a safe and environmentally responsible way without unnecessary and divisive policies. Bill C-48, the Oil Tanker Moratorium Act, and Bill C-69, an act to enact the Impact Assessment Act and the Canadian Energy Regulatory Act, will not help Canada become more competitive. These two pieces of legislation will not have a positive impact on the environment, as they will simply ensure foreign energy products are brought to the market instead of ours. Therefore, Strathcona County is asking the mayor to provide a letter of support in favor of the resolution, which they intend to put forward at the 2020 FCM conference in Toronto. The options are the council resolve that the mayor provides a letter of support to Strathcona County, or the council direct administration will find further information. This item is in alignment with the following strategic area: internal external communication, relationship building. Strathcona Council is seeking support from other municipalities for the proposed resolution as well. Your Worship.
Thank you, City Clerk. I'd like to just speak to this before I ask questions or ask for comments. Just to remind everyone, I had the opportunity to speak to the Senate of Regina and was invited to speak on Bill C-48, and that's the oil tanker ban moratorium on the north end of Vancouver Island up to the Alaska line on the British Columbia coastline. And certainly there was a great deal of discussion where we've limited the access of markets for Canadian oil. And it was certainly a lot of the presenters there, the bulk of the presenters in Regina, from municipalities, businesses, cities, towns, all supported not having that tanker ban because it certainly limits the market access to Canadian exports, which are very efficient, effective, and environmentally friendly produced from the perspective of comparatively and democratically produced people's workers' rights. C-69 is an issue that has been discussed, is the No More Pipelines bill, certainly changing the regulations that are required to move forward. I've had a chance to speak to the mayor of Strathcona County numerous times on this, and he's very passionate about this issue, and I certainly support him as a fellow mayor, and I hope council will consider granting this. The intention is to bring a discussion, and the energy corridor, for anyone's information, has been discussed at a national, federal level a couple times, providing access for power, gas, oil, any utilities to travel across Canada to ensure that we connect this country, this great country, from coast to coast. And we don't have that today. Today we have the largest refinery in Canada not using 1 ounce of Canadian oil to provide gasoline to a good third of the country. There's the east side of the country, we have tankers traveling down the St. Lawrence Seaway, again bringing foreign oil to Quebec and even into Ontario. So I think there's some serious discussion that needs to be had. And from an FCM perspective, I know that discussing with other mayors, the municipal world, we feel it's a responsibility. We've had challenges at the federal, provincial level, but as municipal leaders, we all know this. We don't represent a political party, we represent the people that we represent that have elected us duly to this job. And I think the message that we want to carry to FCM is that the discussion needs to be had. Discussion needs to be had at the municipal level so that information is truly disseminated out to the people that make up this country. And it's well represented by FCM. You know, I don't want to go down, I can go down a rabbit hole for all afternoon on this discussion, but I just wanted to add a few comments before I opened it up for any questions or comments. Councilor Torres.
Thank you, Your Worship. I generally am hesitant when we're getting into other levels of government and kind of getting within a jurisdiction that may not necessarily be a municipal one. However, in this case, after attending FCM in Quebec City with the mayor this last spring, I really feel that it is important that at a local level, speaking with kind of a unified voice from all the communities that value the energy industry and what it can do for our country and what it can do under a scenario where it's done right. And I think advocating on that basis is a good thing to do, especially when you do see at FCM, you see the opposite point of view that resolutions are made on that behalf, which would be, you know, the end of all fossil fuels with no scenario where they could exist, rather than, you know, some level of middle ground and having an open debate. So I think it's good to support these things, if nothing else, to have a meaningful debate at the kind of the national level with municipalities all over the country, so that you can get to a point where you may find common ground, and that those kind of sentiments can work their ways back into the communities across the country, which ultimately could lead to somewhere that would be better than where we are right now.
Yes, thanks, Your Worship. The energy corridor has been proposed many years back, and with the intent of running it north of actually to the Northwest Territories, where there's really nobody living at this point relative to establishing a corridor. There's some challenges that were addressed at that point. I think bringing this forward and having a vote on this would really clearly identify what portions of Canada are on board with this or not. I think it's been proposed as a solution, if you like, for the country. And at this point, before this idea gets too far down the road, particularly the energy corridor, the FCM votes will give us a pretty good idea as to whether or not this is something that's feasible. And if it's met with resounding 99% approval, that's a pretty good idea that Canada as a country supports it. If it's not, I think it'll be what are the challenges and what do we need to do to get there. And I suspect, given certainly the position of at least one of the provinces, it may not receive the kind of support on Eastern Canada that we would like to see it happen. Relative to the other two bills, I think they're being challenged by First Nations relative to their ability to sustain economic development around the tanker on the West Coast. In terms of the pipeline, I think the challenge here is that it's the first go around through this bill, if you like. And I think in the end, we'll likely see the pipeline built, and after that pipeline is built, it's probably the best time to begin to initiate some of the changes. Because I think, again, getting through it once is going to be a challenge. And we all know the first time you go through a process like this, there are always pieces in it that you go, oh, I wish I could have done it different. But sending this letter, I think, would really emphasize the importance that it does have, and that we want to make sure that going forward, if there are changes to be made, there are changes that will actually support the ongoing growth and development, particularly for us where we're bound.
Councilor Buckingham.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just speak to what Councilor Torres said, or I kind of on the same page, where I don't necessarily want to wade into other people's jurisdictions often. But this kind of letter is exactly why we're sitting around this table, if you ask me. This is advocating for our community. This is advocating for the two provinces we represent, because it's the interests of those two provinces and the interests of the people in our community that we're sitting around the table for. So I would speak 100% in favor of sending this letter forward. Thanks.
Any other, Councilor Baker?
Your worship, I believe that this is exactly our job. We're part of a organization across Canada that deal with the oil industry as municipalities. And the federal government is dealing with oil, which is dealt with every day by the provinces and the municipalities. And telling them that we believe they should find a solution and a proper corridor rather than a dozen provinces or 12, 10 provinces arguing over it can't go here and it can't go there. When they built the railroad 120 years ago, the National Railroad, I don't know how they decided on it, but they built it. And you know what? They got a corridor right across Canada. And you know, 100 years later, maybe we can, Strathcona County's got something here. And then you won't have all these delays every time you want to do something. And we're not telling them they have to build it, we're asking them to put aside a corridor. Just like you caveat a bypass around our city. 15, 20 years ago, we caveated a bypass for a new highway around our city. Right or wrong, we're still waiting on the caveat supposedly done, but we're still waiting on the road. But maybe the right of way is still there, so I think it's exactly the right thing to do.
Councilor, any other comments? Not seeing any, I'll look for direction from the council. Councilor Defendant.
The council resolved that and Mayor provides a letter to Strathcona County supporting their proposed resolution to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities that urges the federal government to work with the provinces, municipalities, and indigenous groups to establish a utility corridor that would span from coast to coast and to repeal, amend Bill C-48 and C-69.
Thank you, Councilor. Secretary. Councilor Buckingham. Any further discussion before I call for the question? Not seeing any, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moving on to 6.6, I see on the agenda, to operations. City Manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. To present 6.6.1, airport fuel provider, airport, last day report.
Thank you, Your Worship. Council. He would have been here, but he's fighting with the fog on the runway right now, so.
We'll let him fight with that drum.
Yeah. So what we're here for today is request for decision for the airport fuel provider agreement renewal, which is essentially what the company charges us to deliver the fuel to the airport. So the recommendation is the council approve the City of Lloydminster enter into a 3-year agreement effective February 1st, 2020 to January 31st, 2023 with Petro Value Products to provide fuel at the Lloydminster Airport, and that the mayor and city clerk be authorized to sign and seal all necessary documents. Our current agreement with them has expired. During the January 21st, 2020 Governments Empowered Committee meeting, administration presented information to the committee regarding the expiration of the airport fuel provider agreement between the City of Lloydminster and Petro Value Products of Canada. Petro Value Products Canada offers competitive pricing, guaranteed supply, industry-leading fuel safety programs, and around-the-clock to support a wide variety of industries throughout the country. Administration is satisfied with the level of service being provided by Petro Value and has recommended that the City of Lloydminster into an agreement with Petro Value Products Canada to renew the agreement for additional 3-year term. We initially had a 5-year term with the option for 3, and then we'd like to enter into a 3-year term with them. So the options are: council approve the City of Lloydminster enter into a 3-year agreement effective February 1st, 2020 to January 31st, 2023 with the Petro Value Products Canada to provide fuel at the Lloydminster Airport, and that the mayor and city clerk be authorized to sign and seal all necessary documents. Council not approve the City of Lloydminster enter into a 3-year program or agreement, effective February 1st to January 31st, 2023 with Petro Value Products. The council recommend administration gather more information to bring forward to future council meeting. This item is alignment with the following strategic, sustainable fiscal strategy, entering into the additional 3-year agreement with Retro Valley demonstrates the City of Lloydminster is committed to securing the best possible pricing for its aviation fuel and offer its airport users the best possible competitive pricing, thus attracting and retaining loyal customer service. So on the budget implication, the main thing is that this is a flat rate what they charge us for delivery of jet fuel at 9 cents a liter and avgas at 2 cents a liter, delivered to Lloydminster Airport.
Questions? Councillor Beck.
I was just taking a look at the, perhaps an amendment on, it doesn't, it's not indicating that we are exercising an option from the initial contract, and I don't know if I'm being too fussy on that in the initial. I don't know if that means anything, but it looks like we're just entering into a 3-year contract. We're actually extending a 5-year contract that we've got.
That's correct, yeah. We had
I'm
an
not
option.
sure on the wording there if that needs to reflect that, or if that's any type of big, any type of big.
I'll ask the city clerk to comment, if that's all right.
I could provide some options for wording. How about that City Council approve the City of Lloydminster renew that for a period of 3 years, effective February 1st, 2020 to January 31st, 2023, the agreement with Petro Value Products Canada Incorporated to provide fuel at the Lloydminster Airport. The word renew is in there.
Okay, yeah, that's good. I was just wondering, I'm easy on that, it's just something I know.
So Dave, I know if I could ask for clarification, I know this came to GPC last week. So the past 5 years is with the same rate. We're not seeing an increase in rate, are we?
That's correct, yeah. They're providing the same rate that they did with the initial contract.
And again, for anyone that's just joining us this meeting and missed the last meeting, this is not the price of fuel that we sell at the airport, but it's actually, this is a portion of how we arrive at the cost of our fuel service that we provide, the full fuel service that we provide at the airport.
That's correct. There is a rack price, and what these people is what they charge us to deliver our fuel to us.
Right, and then we have a handling fee that is paid to a third party at the airport, and that's how we arrive at the final price, that if you were to pull up your airplane, just like you would pull up to a service station, and we offer full service.
That's correct, and there's manufacturers in the pricing. Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I'll look for council for direction on the amended word. Councilor Buckingham.
Move the council approve the City of Lloydminster renew for a period of 3 years, effective February 1st, 2020 to January 31st, 2023, with Petro Value Products Canada Inc. to provide fuel to Lloydminster Airport, and the mayor and city clerk be authorized to sign and seal all necessary documents.
That work for you, City Clerk?
Excellent.
Excellent. Second, Councilor Torres. Any further discussion? Not seeing any. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, Dave.
Thank you.
Moving on to agenda item 6.6.2. I'll look to the city manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. To present 6.6.2 parks and green spaces, fees and rental rates. I'll ask Blake Nielsen to come forward and present.
Good afternoon, Your Worship, Council.
Good afternoon, Blake.
Okay, I'm here to present the Parks and Green Space fees and rental rates. The recommendation here is that Council approve the City of Lloydminster 2020-2021 Parks and Green Space fees and rental rates as outlined in the attached Schedule A, effective February 1st, 2020. The issue is Parks and Green Space rental rates require updating during the January 21st During the January 21st, 2020 Governance and Priorities Committee meeting, administration presented the proposed 2020-2021 Parks and Green Spaces fees and rental rates to the committee. Fees and rental rates supplement tax appropriations as a source of revenue for the City of Lloydminster to maintain its parks and green spaces. Recommended changes to the proposed Parks and Green Spaces fees and rental rates include that Weaver Park Campground, picnic shelter rentals, and additional price to an overflow area that was developed in 2019. At the cemetery, all pricing is a 3% increase with the exception of excavations This increase reflects the extra manpower and safety needed for this operation. And for ball and soccer, rental rates, youth rates, as per our recreational fee policy, there are not yet set to 65%, and administration will endeavor to incorporate this change to the rate over the next 2 years. The options I present to council are that council approve the City of Lloydminster 2020-2021 Parks and Green Space fees and rental rates as outlined in the attached Schedule A, effective February 1st, 2020. That council not approve the City of Lloydminster 2020-2021 Parks and Green Spaces fees and rental rates as outlined in the attached Schedule A, effective February 1st, 2020. Option 3, that council request further information from the administration and bring City of Lloydminster 2020-2021 Parks and Green Spaces fees and rental rates to a subsequent council meeting. This item is in alignment with following strategic area sustainable fiscal strategy, providing parks and green spaces to residents and visitors at a fair price, while continuing to offer opportunities for socializing, recreation, relaxation, play, learning, and connecting with nature. Budget financial implications: increases to fees and rent rates will ensure cost recovery rates are in place to maintain the sustainable service levels for the City of Lloydminster's parks and green spaces. The revenue increases generated will be incorporated into 2020 operating budget.
Thank you, Blake. Any questions or comments for Blake?
Just one question. We talked about the subject here last time, and sort of gravitate to it. It's the white hair maybe. But I'm assuming all the fees there are one time, so you don't pay $120 a year for your headstone or like that. If you pay $120, you get the headstone.
Yeah, that's just for the permit application.
All right.
So we're basically for control of what's going in there.
Just planning ahead.
I was just curious, and I should have asked it last week, and I thought of it after the fact. Are we expecting to see this same policy come forward a year from now? We're approving a fee structure that's good to 2021. Is there an opportunity to look at this on a further out as opposed to just 1 year and never thought of it until after the meeting last week?
Yeah, it's 2 years on this, and I believe it was pretty much the same as the rest of the fees and structure that you guys approved, so that's why it stays in 2 years.
Thank you.
I think, Luke, one of the questions I was asked, so we are going to get soccer up to 65%.
Yes.
And that's where we're getting to, over a period of time. So there's some adjustment, we're trying to move the teams and the organization so that it's fair to them, it's not an instant hit. So I appreciate that very much. Does that affect the ball as well?
Yeah, it's all the same.
It's all the same. Okay, excellent. Well, that clarifies the question I had last week from the media, which I thought I was on the right track, so I'm glad to clarify that. Any other questions or comments from council? I'll look for direction before somebody plans.
Lay your final plot, right? I'll make that motion. Move that council approve the City of Lloydminster 2020 to 2021 Parks and Green Space fees and rental rates as outlined in the attached Schedule A, effective February 1, 2020.
Seconded. Councillor Craig. Any further discussion? We'll talk about you directly. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, Blake.
Thanks, guys.
Can't have a little fun at this job once in a while, so that's for sure. Moving back to City Manager 6.6.3.
Thank you, Your Worship. To present 6.6.3, develop permit retail sales and spiritual healing in the direct control 1 district, Roxborough Central.
Yeah. Yeah, scratch all that discussion on the plot. There's healing coming, right?
Thank you, Your Worship, Council.
Good afternoon, Roxanne. Yeah, just make sure you pull it close to you. I hear you.
Can you hear me now? Before you, I have a permit, and the recommendation is that council approve the use of retail sales and aesthetic shop to be located at 5010 46th Street, Lot 25, Block 10, Plan 00239. as discretionary uses within the DC1 direct control zoning district. The applicant is wanting to rent space in a building in the downtown area that's within the direct control district. All uses within the direct control district are subject to council approval. During the January 21, 2020 GPC meeting, administration advised that the application had been received on November 21, 2019 to review the proposed business at 5010 46th Street for the use of retail sales and the spiritual healing as defined under aesthetic shop. The location is in a DC1 district. The uses of aesthetics, house services, retail sales are all discretionary in the DC district and are all at the discretion of the council. Since the loans are direct control, administration advertised the application in the local paper on November 28th, and letters were mailed to all abutting landowners within 30 meters of the subject lands as required through Land Use Bylaw 5, 2016. There were no concerns received. The options before you today are one, that council approved the use of retail sales and aesthetic shop, spiritual healing, to be located at 5010 46th Street, Lot 25, Block 10, Line 0023959 as discretionary uses within the DC1 direct control zoning district. Or two, the council will refuse the application. This is in alignment with the following strategic area of downtown revitalization, and it will add a new business to the downtown core.
Thank you, Roxanne. Any questions, comments? Councilor Baker.
Just one question, because I have no trouble with the development. I just wondered, the parking on the east side of the building, there's an accounting office in there, and these people are there all day working. I just wondered, 4608 50th Avenue, right across the alley, is that the same owner? Okay, so they got lots of
The
parking.
spare lot north of the, yes, yeah, that's their part, that's their lot as well. There's
Yeah.
28 stalls in the 5010,
Okay,
and then at 4608, yeah. that's
okay,
also their lot.
I thought I was, thank you.
Councilor Thorson.
I can tell you I worked there for a period, so all the employees park in 4608, and then the visitors would use that other area just east of
Okay.
the building.
Good for them.
And I think this question was asked during GPC, again, just since this is council. The only reason this is here, Roxanne, this would have been approved if it would have not been a DC1 direct control district that requires council. It's been zoned to commercial. This application would have likely been potentially approved. Thank you. Any other comments? Not seeing any. I'll look for direction from council on 6.6.3. Councilor Buckingham.
Move the council approve the use of a retail sales and aesthetic shop, spiritual healing, to be located at 5010 46th Street, Lot 25, Block 10, Plan 0023959 as discretionary uses within the DC1 direct control zoning district.
Thank you. Seconder? Councilor Baker. Any further discussion? Not seeing any. I'll call for the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you very much, Roxanne. At this time, we'll move on to agenda item number 7, correspondence and information. City Clerk, nothing. There's no, I don't have an actual report attached. I'll attach one for the next council meeting, I believe, or so, as to where we're at. But just to bring everybody's attention, I'm sure everybody's aware we have the SUMA convention starting on Sunday in Regina, Saskatchewan. We're gathering the municipal leaders across Saskatchewan for a very interesting discussion going into a provincial and municipal election in 2020 in Saskatchewan. Anyone else have any other comments on the council reports? I will say I'd like to thank the deputy mayor and the acting mayor while I was away for some time from the city for covering and ensuring that things ran smoothly. I appreciate that very much. Is there any other matters at this time that this council needs to deal with? I just want to thank the staff and those in the gallery today and the media for bearing with us while we had that in camera. We had a small technical difficulty prior and some information wasn't transferred. So we were able to remedy that. So thank you for bearing with us. I'll move to inquiries from the media.
Thank you, Your Worship. Today we have an interview request for yourself, Mayor Albers, Councillor Buckingham, and Councillor Diachuk.
Thank you very much. I'll look for a motion to go.
Motion recess.
Recess, second by Councillor Buckingham. All in favor? Carried.